Hello, students. We have gone through the group communication, and the first group communication we are going to study in this video lecture is interviews. Interviews, in our general parlance, we know is an interview for the job or for the employment purposes, but it is not the only meaning that we expect to take into account. Interview, the word stands for the sight between or the view between. Interview, therefore, may be, just a minute, interview, therefore, may be defined as meeting between two persons for the purpose of getting a view of each other or knowing each other. Murphy and Peck, who defined interview, is a conversation with a purpose. It aims at getting truthful responses from the candidate. Normally, interview brings to a mind a situation where employer tries to judge the candidate for the job and to choose the suitable job and to choose the suitable candidate for the suitable job is the main area for the organization. The candidate's aim is to find whether the job is he is seeking is suitable for him also. That is the candidate's viewpoint. Some of the journalists who interviews some of the prominent and dominant persons in the in the process. As we have seen, the purpose of an interview is not to recruit the candidate. There are various intentions behind the interviews, and for this purpose we have to go through as the purposes are, so the interviews will be called. Types of interviews will be called, and in this line, if the purpose is to recruit the candidate for the job, that becomes the employment selection interview. If the intention or the purpose is to evaluate, appraise the performance of an employee, it stands for the assessment type of interview. If to launch complaint, it becomes the grievance interview. If the candidate or the employee is to be promoted for the further or higher post, it stands for promotion interview. If the candidate is defaulting and he is to be removed, such an interview will be called when the candidate is leaving the organization. It stands for exit interview. If to judge and evaluate the candidate's response, emotional and psychological response to a particular incident or issue, such a conditions are created and the candidate is judged or the human being is judged under such a stress interview, so it becomes the stress interview. Reprimand interview is to scold the candidate for the interview purposes. And as we have seen the types of interviews, we have this type of interview. If the counseling is to be prepared, if counseling is to be made of the candidate defaulting and if is reporting late, is mentally disturbed, then we can have such a psychological type of interviews and it becomes the types of interview. So let us go through the first type of interview, that is employment selection interview. When an organization employs its staff, it does so by interviewing the prospective candidates. to judge the candidate's qualification in order to determine who is the most suitable candidate for the job, to give the candidate essential facts about the job and the organization, to create the confidence and understanding in the most suitable candidate in order to convince him to accept the job, to promote the goodwill for the organization among the candidates interviewed. Since the objective of the selection interview is to select the most suitable candidate, the interviewer lays the emphasis on the candidate's qualification, candidate's personal skill caliber, qualities of the character, intelligence, and overall personality of the candidate is to be judged. In the 20 or 30 or 1 hour interview, the best of the candidates is to be judged and find out what is more suitable in the candidate. So the organization interviews the candidate for this knowing purposes, and it stands for employment selection. If the candidate is appointed, but there is after certain periodical, say, uh, years or months, he is to be judged, he is to be appraised and evaluated. So there is a two-way communication. The superior evaluates the subordinate's achievement. The superior makes a checklist of the subordinators' strong and weak points, duties and responsibilities, and performances made by him. The interview focuses on the employee's attention on the targets which needs to be achieved. So while evaluating the performance of the interview also lays down a sort of blueprint for the future targets for the employees. Assessment interview is conducted once generally in a year. Asking the employees to fill up the form is one of the way. The confidential reports of higher authority is one of the way. Candidates' opinion is also one of the way. Managing director who conducts the assessment interview also feels embarrassed as he is to review his subordinate's performance face to face and point out his shortcomings. But this appraisal and assessment interview serves the two purposes. It increases the efficiency of the organization, it improves the performance of the employee. The manager is able to find out the employee's ambitions, motivation, interest through such a frank and confidential manner. Anastasi is a researcher and professor of communication, has given two objectives of this interview, and it is to improve the job performance and to develop the internal communication between manager and the subordinates. So it is a kind of informal atmosphere for informal communication. This uh, this type of meeting will serve. The principal assessment, internal assessment of the student's academic achievement throughout the year through the interview, project work, presentation, mock studies, or mock situations is a type of an assessment interview. Viva's oral exams is a part of internal assessment that you may face and experience in your studies. Next is grievance interview. And employees are encouraged if they have any question, any problem, any physical, any mental suffering, or if they have any complaints to be made, they can directly walk into the superior's cabin room office who can take the measures to remedy those situations which cause dissatisfaction to the employees. Some organizations therefore adopt an open door policy. An employee can walk into the superior's cabin without prior permission, and frankly expresses his grievance difficulty. The frank expression relieves the employee of the tension that builds up within him and affects his performance. Psychologically, such a grievance interview gives an outlet to the employee's emotions and feelings. So, employee gets a chance to speak his mind freely and frankly. The employee gets the needed feedback to improve his administrative setup, and the employee develops a sense of belonging in in the process. So, such interviews needs to be conducted. It's not an easy task; it's a delicate task. But such interviews are to be conducted through a patience and positive attitude. The employer should play the role of a psychological counselor. He should probe the employee and try to find out what actually is the employee's problem. As the employee begins, the employer should note down the nature of his complaint. After the employee has finished, the employer has completed noting down the points. The employer should repeat the employee's complaints. If the employee's complaints and grievance does not require any verification of facts and can be easily attended to. But if the grievance needs to be looked down, the employer should promise the employee that all necessary action soon be taken. The employer should take the employee's grievance if it is genuine and try to offer solutions to these problems. So, a good and fair ambience, चांगलं वातावरण निर्मितीसाठी अशा प्रकारच्या कंप्लेंट्सचं काम करणं, कंप्लेंट्स दूर करण्यासाठी त्याला सोल्युशन शोधण्यासाठी जर व्यवस्थापनाने काम केलं तर डेफिनेटली इट्स क्रिएट्स अ गुड ॲम्बियन्स in the environment and in the organization environment. Promotion interviews. Next time, who is due for promotion is to be interviewed. If the more than one candidate, then there should be such an interview. It should be a measure of the attitude of the employee. The interview provides an opportunity to the management to make the employee aware of the responsibilities he will have to shoulder. If there is more than one employee competing for promotion to the highest post, interview can be partly a selection interview. When the selection is made, the employees who are not selected should be told on the basis of decision. So like this, promotion interviews are there. Next we have exit interview. Exit interview is a kind of a grievance interview. If the organization is not working efficiently and the candidate is not satisfied with the job, in such conditions, the employee decides to leave the organization on his own. जेव्हा कर्मचारी संघटना स्वतःहून सोडून जाण्याचा निर्णय घेतो तेव्हा अशी इंटरव्ह्यू घेतली जात असते किंवा जेव्हा ऑर्गनायझेशन त्या कर्मचाऱ्याच्या कामाच्या संदर्भात सॅटिस्फाईड नसते मग त्यांना सांगितलं जातं तुम्ही निघून जा, त्यांना कामावरून काढून टाकलं जातं, तेव्हा अशी इंटरव्ह्यू घेतली जाते. ह्या दोन कंडिशन्स ह्या ठिकाणी एक्झिट इंटरव्ह्यूसाठी असतात. म्हणून जेव्हा मॅनेजर एम्प्लॉयर जेव्हा हे सांगण्याचं काम पडतं तेव्हा अशी इंटरव्ह्यू ऑर्गनाईज केली जावी. An employee who is living on his own, he should report why he is leaving the organization so that organization may work on satisfied, whether salary is satisfying, whether conditions are satisfying, whether good working environment आहे का, चांगलं कामाचं वातावरण आहे का, तिथं चांगलं वातावरण निर्मिती केलेली आहे का. So like this, all that we need to understand. And if it is there, then such an interview will help to recuperate. ज्या चुका आहेत त्या दूर करण्यासाठी दोन्ही पक्षाला ऑर्गनायझेशन आणि कर्मचारी दोघांनाही उपयोगाच्या पडतात. म्हणून this interview serve so many problems and so many purposes. So like this interview is extremely useful for both organization and employee. Next is stress interview. Stress doesn't mean best tension. Tension is typically different one. But stress is defined as a body's reaction or the individual's reaction to a particular issue or problem. The stress may be defined in the individual stressing response to the situation. So, under stress, under conditions, how the individual is capable to cope with the situation and respond to the situation. If he is working in emotional balance which causes his blood pressure to shoot up and increases his heartbeat, the person under the stress therefore fails to communicate his thoughts and feelings immediately. But psychologists believe that human body has the power of resilience to meet the stresses caused by events and environment. The psychologist Sally calls it a general adaptation syndrome. The syndrome consists of three stages: the alarm stage, resistance stage, exhaustion stage. Beside these physical symptoms, psychological symptoms of the stressful individual are a feeling of helplessness. Sally distinguishes between good stress and bad stress. He calls the good stress as eustress. And modern businesses is caught in a cutthroat competition. Therefore, when interviewing panel interviews a candidate, there is a responsibility of the labor welfare officer or the panelist to interview the difficult situation. So like this, we have stress interview. Reprimand interview means to scold. Scolding a subordinate is a delicate task. खूप नाजूक गोष्ट असते. जेव्हा कर्मचाऱ्याचा परफॉर्मन्स कामाच्या ठिकाणी योग्य नसेल, वॉर्निंग दिल्यानंतरही तो व्यक्ती सुधरत नसेल, सुधारणा होत नसेल, so he must be reprimanded for his lax duties, for his lapses, getting drunk, not being punctual, playing truant. The superior must use all his persuasive skills to persuade him so that he may recuperate, he may come up. But if the candidate is not working, the employee's performance is affected because of his domestic problem, dissatisfaction of the job, lack of adjustment to the environment or the job. So reprimand interview should aim at finding out real problem of the employee. So this is a very delicate task, and if such interviews are organized, it stands for reprimand interview. Next interview is psychological interview. Nowadays, some large and progressive organizations employ the counselors, psychological counselors. The main job of these counselors is to solve the personality problems. These counselors have specialized training. Suppose in case of industrial psychology, the interview helps the group or individual to solve their problems and to increase their efficiency of the work. They will feel motivated. They will feel their problems are put aside or solved. Distracting, disturbing factors affecting the work are solved, and by this the employee efficiency is increased. So employee superior and family must cooperate with the employee. The fact that organization employ industrial psychologists testifies the good service and they are able to render to the workers and organization. Such interviews prove immense useful to the organization with regard to their workers. They are not just workers but also a human being, and this interview takes account of that, and that is what it is extremely useful when it comes to the psychological interviews. So we have seen these types of interviews. In our next video lecture we will go about the essentials of a successful interview, at the same time the role of candidate and the role of organization or interviewing panel we will study, so that you may come up with the very good results, because such a topic is also useful for each and every student who wish to pursue their career in future. So everyone need these skills, that interview skills. So we will go through rest of the matter in our next video lectures that comes up. So thank you.